the Hizmet movement and in the schools of the movement, a key thing is that we are educating students to make a difference in society. Also, we're educating students in the Hizmet schools to be good citizens, to be citizens of their country and good citizens of the world. That we say you might say in some respect. My name is Father Anthony Ciorra. And I'm delighted to be a part of this interview here today. And briefly, by way of my background, I'm currently at Sacred Hearth University, which is located in Fairfield, Connecticut. And my work there is I teach theology, and I'm also one of the associate vice presidents for mission and identity at the university. That it's very important for Muslims to have dialogue with non-Muslims. And for this reason, my own experience has been, and keep in mind, again, I've been in these academic institutions, I have been consistently with the most educated of people here in the United States, people who have Ph.D s, some in theology and religion, who know nothing about Islam, nothing. This is your educated group, right? So this is a major problem. If you have the educators who know nothing about Islam, what does it say about the ordinary person on the street? Their view of Islam is going to come from what they see on television, when they see on the news, when they see an act of terrorism. So this is the problem. And so therefore, the dialogue of Muslims with non-Muslims is very important. First, for the face of Islam, that you bring to others what the message is. But it's also important that non-Muslims be there together with Muslims for this reason. And many of my Muslim brothers here have heard me say this many times, that we develop the relationship with one another. So for example, very often I'm invited, or we are invited, to the Ramadan dinner, right? And it's such a privilege to be at the Ramadan dinner because you see the importance of this one particular principle within Islam, the principle of fasting, but you're being invited to share this experience that is so important in the Muslim year of Ramadan by participating, being a part of, say, a dinner at the end of the Ramadan day. So what happens is you experience the beauty of Islam, see? And what happens is you become brothers and sisters with the Muslim community, and they with us, the Christian community, and with the Jewish community. So Muslims being in dialogue with non-Muslims, I think, is not a luxury today. It's something that is essential, something that we must do and continue to do. Education and youth are our future, right? That in fact the emphasis on youth is so very important, all right? And we have a chance with youth to change things. Someone recently told me that if in fact a prejudice passes from one generation to a second generation, you have a problem. But if it passes to a second and third generation, you have a chronic problem. And so, therefore, when we look to our world right now, our world in so many ways is such a broken and fractured place. And so, therefore, with youth, we have an opportunity through education to change things. the whole purpose of education is to be transformative. And in the Hizmet movement and in the schools of the movement, a key thing is that we are educating students to make a difference in society. Also, we're educating students in the Hizmet schools to be good citizens, to be citizens of their country and good citizens of the world. And what does that mean? That in fact, as educated people, we learn, or they learn, to let go of their biases and their prejudices and to embrace the other. So, for example, I was not too long ago in upstate New York and in a place called Chautauqua. And they had there for the children what we call a peace camp. And the peace camp were the Muslim children, the Jewish children, and the Christian children playing together, see? And you watch the little children playing together, they don't have the prejudices or the hatreds that the adults have. So education is a tool that can transform people. If you transform people, you transform society. As we say, one student at a time. So these schools are the greatest tool to make concrete the things that we say we want to do. So Fethullah Gulen, he's a believer in the centrality and the importance of education. So it's something that we, especially here in this country, we applaud, right? And also for another reason, that the schools are academically sound, right? The academics are very, very solid, but getting back to what I was saying earlier, those running the schools represent a moderate, inviting form of Islam. So this is also, in addition to preparing students to be good citizens, you also are teaching them on another level religion at its best. Religion at its best brings people together. Religion at its best brings about healing, forgiveness, and peace. The issue of charity, right, is such an important thing. As a matter of fact, you might say, in some respects, that the focus on charity brings all of the major religions together. And I think that when we speak of charity, there's no better way of bringing groups together than by engaging within the Islamic community, but also including other religious traditions, in the works of charity, in helping others. You know very well that charity is one of the pillars of Islam, right? And within Christianity, it's really at the heart of the gospel message of what Jesus came to tell us. And within the Hebrew scripture, within the Old Testament, that the prophets were always calling people back to charity, calling people back to justice, to take care of the poor, right? So therefore, the importance of emphasizing charity makes religion become really what it should be. When in fact we practice charity, that's religion at its very best. Religion without charity is not religion. So therefore, that in fact the Hizmet's outreach to the poor is something that is the living out of that important value. And I would mention, for example, in Turkey, I remember visiting one of the hospitals that Hizmet sponsors there. And to see there in the hospital that they were taking care of the poorest of the poor. And as I saw some of the sick people there, I thought to myself, thank God that this is being done for them, taking care of their physical needs. And so, therefore, Hizmet, I think, let me put it to you this way, there's a Catholic writer. He was a Benedictine monk in the 1920s. His name is Dom Chapman. And in talking about religion, he says, if you need to know how you're doing, he he says, look to the charity of your life. Look to the charity of your life. And if that is the measure of how you're doing, then I would say Hizmet is doing quite well, because you emphasize the centrality of charity. Okay, the argument that I read about and see on television about Hizmet, that you move beyond Turkey. Really what's presented as a criticism of Hizmet is one of the strengths of Hizmet. That, in other words, you're not a narrow country or even a narrow democracy that only looks inward. The sign of health of a country is when you're able to engage with other countries, right? That you don't become an island unto itself. So, for example, here in the United States, not that we always do it well, we don't, but a very important value for us is our relationship to the world. So you don't want to become what we would call isolationists. So to say that Hizmet, to criticize Hizmet because you're involved in the world, is okay, well then Hizmet should be isolationist. So you just stay within the confines of Turkey. What people need to understand is what Hizmet is doing is going to many countries, I think 116 countries if I remember correctly, but going to many countries. And what you're doing is you're building a bridge in those countries in terms of how people in all these other countries see Islam, but also how they see the country of Turkey. So they see Turkey then as a country that wants to embrace the other, that wants to be a player on the world stage, and through your involvement with other countries, they see you as people who want to be instruments of peace for our world. Within Islam, the very word itself means peace, right? And so I think Hizmet is really an instrument of peace, as an instrument of going into our broken world, trying to make relationships happen, and in that sense, bringing about peace.
I just think it's very intriguing and fascinating for someone to have started something that has spread throughout the world. And the people that I've encountered, I have never met Fethullah Gulen, but the people that I've met who are inspired by him inspire me.